we already discussed about the introduction part of performance evaluation and management. As the second session, we discuss the purposes of performance evaluation. As the third session, we discuss performance evaluation models as a systematic process of performance evaluation. Then in our last lesson, we discussed performance evaluation policies and procedures. Today, we are going to discuss about the performance evaluation criteria and standards. Okay, I think you are ready. You already got the learning material I sent via the LMS. Is the fifth session of your subject, performance evaluation criteria and standards. These are the intended learning outcomes. After this session, I expect you should be able to define what is performance evaluation criteria mean, when identify the characteristics of an effective performance evaluation criteria. Then you should be able to describe the difference among traits, behaviors, and results criteria of performance. Then another two types of performance criteria we will discuss is subjective criteria and objective criteria. Then when you develop the performance evaluation criteria, what you should do, we discuss. Then we move to the performance evaluation standards. You should be able to define what is performance evaluation standards mean, then identify the main characteristics of an effective performance evaluation standards. Then you should be able to describe three approaches can be used to develop performance evaluation standards. Then we move to the first objective. It is performance evaluation defining performance evaluation criteria. When we do the performance evaluation, you should identify, when you are going to evaluate the performance of employee, how you evaluate the employee's performance. Performance mean the broad performance have the broad meaning. It is not only the just output, and is also included the what the employees achieved and how they achieved their performance, the way of achieving that results. Performance dimensions of performance upon which an employee is evaluated are called the performance criteria. It means under the evaluation, what dimensions, what factors you are going to consider, that is simply called the performance evaluation criteria. According to the Greek, the factors on which employee is evaluated are called the criteria of performance evaluation. It means when you are going to evaluate any particular employee performance, how you evaluate, how you collect evidence on which factors you are collecting evidence about employees' performance. That basic or key factors we considered as the key performance criteria. Okay. Okay. What factors you are going to evaluate, that is called performance evaluation criteria. Criteria should involve dimensions of factors according to which the employee performance are evaluated. In the simple idea of performance evaluation criteria, what factors you are going to, or what dimensions you are going to evaluate on the performance of employees. When we discuss about the organizational settings, any organization have the common goal, specific goal. To achieve that common goal, we that organization decided what primary product or service they have to produce to achieve their primary goals of the organization. For that, they identify the basic task or basic duties, what they have to do to achieve their organizational goals and objectives. Then that the basic work requirement or basic duties, they separate into the primary work segment that allocated to the organizational employees, parties. That is basically we identified as the basic HRM functions, that is called job designing. Then when we are going to evaluate the employee's job, we can identify basically there are three main components. They are tasks, duties, and responsibilities. When we are going to evaluate the success of that job, we should consider their tasks, duties, and responsibilities. Task is the primary segment. Then basically we should consider about the duties of the jobs. Then each criteria, it means the performance evaluation criteria, most of the time we develop based on the organized job, main duties of the jobs. If we consider about the effective performance evaluation criteria, that performance evaluation criteria should have following characteristics. The first one is relevance. Relevance means that as we earlier discussed about the relationship between job and the organizational primary goal, it should relevance. It means the measure of performance must be logically related to the actual outputs of the interbodies as possible. It means the performance criteria should be related with the what employee is producing at their job. If there is no relationship between what they have produced and what we are evaluating, it is not the effective performance evaluation criteria. The second characteristic is sensitivity. The basic idea of the sensitivity, if we use some performance evaluation criteria, it must be able to reflect the difference between high performer and low performer. If we use some performance evaluation criteria that factor or criteria should be able to identify who are the high performer and who are the highly contributed to the organizational achievements, success, or who are the lower committed employees to the organizational success. Then the third characteristic of effective performance evaluation criteria, it should be practical. It means if we select the performance evaluation criteria, it means if we select what factor, that factor should be measurable, and we should be able to collect information about that factor. If we cannot gather or collect information, or if we cannot measure that factor, that criteria is ineffective. We cannot use any factor that has that cannot measure regarding the employee performance. Some factors that are highly related to the job, but we cannot measure, it is useless. If some factors are moderately related to the job, but that is measurable, it is practical in our perspective in the developing performance evaluation criteria. The next author, according to the Smith 1979, listed 4 main characteristics of effective performance evaluation criteria. The same thing, he also mentioned the relevant. It means reliable and valid measures for characteristics being evaluated as closely related to the job output as possible. Relevant means what we should measure the employee has produced. It means the output of the job. Our PE criteria should closely related to the job output. The second characteristics is unbiased. It means we are going to evaluate the job, not the person. It means the performance evaluation criteria should be developed based on the job characteristics of the job, not the person. Some personal things not should be considered when we are developing the effective performance evaluation criteria. Some factors are related with the person, not with the job. That factors not to be considered when we developing the performance evaluation criteria. The next one, third one, is significant. Significant means what we should evaluate, that factor should directly related to the organizational goals. Otherwise, through the performance evaluation, we cannot ensure the organizational success. If we want to achieve the organizational success, that can be measured if we use the related factors with the organizational goals. The last one is practical. Same as the previous 3 characteristics, practicability. It means if we select any factor, that should be measurable and observable. Otherwise, we cannot apply in our performance evaluation. By using these 4 authors, we can summarize what are the characteristics of an effective performance evaluation criteria. we can list the 6 characteristics of performance evaluation criteria, effective performance evaluation criteria. The first one is relevant. The simple idea of relevant or relevance means that performance evaluation criteria should be closely related to the job outputs. The second one is significant. Second characteristics of the effective performance evaluation criteria we can identify as the significant. Significant means what performance evaluation criteria we should develop, it is directly related to the organizational goals. Third one is sensitivity. Sensitivity means if any factor be identified as the performance evaluation criteria should be able to reflect the difference between high performer and low performer, should be able to reflect the difference between high performer and the low performer. Otherwise, that performance evaluation criteria not be effective. Fourth one is practical, very important. It means the practicability of performance evaluation criteria means what factor we should identify as the performance evaluation criteria that is measurable and the accessible. Measurable and the accessible. The fifth one is unbiased. Unbiased. Unbiased means the performance evaluation criteria we should develop that is not based on the characteristics of the person. It should be based on the characteristics of the job, not on the person. That is unbiased. The 6 characteristics we can add to these 2 authors, that is understandable. In our performance evaluation, we create the performance agreement, we communicate with the relevant employee at the beginning of the selected performance evaluation time period. These are the factors we are going to evaluate your jobs at the end of this time period. The employee should have clear idea on which factors the evaluators are considered. Evaluators are going to consider at the evaluation time. It should be understandable to the employee. On the other hand, the performance evaluation criteria should be understandable to the evaluator as well. The 6 main characteristics we can summarize. The first one is relevant. It should be closely related to the job output. The second one is significant, that directly related to the organizational goals. The third one is sensitivity. It means the performance evaluation criteria should be able to reflect the difference between high performer and low performers. The fourth one is practicability. Practical. It means any criteria that should be measurable and the accessible. The fifth one, unbiased. Performance evaluation criteria should be developed based on the characteristics of the job, not on the characteristics of the person who are performing currently the job. The person may be changed, but the performance evaluation criteria not be changed based on the personal changes. The last one is understandable. If it is understandable to the employee, on the other hand, it is understandable to the evaluator, that is effective because it can communicate to the both parties. Then we move to the next learning outcomes. It is types of performance evaluation criteria. We can categorize performance evaluation criteria based on the two main classifications. The first one is what factor we are going to evaluate. According to OPATH 2002, performance evaluation criteria can be developed with respect to the traits, behaviors, and results. There are three: traits, behaviors, and results. According to this classification, the performance evaluation criteria also can be divided into three groups. It means the trait criteria, behavioral criteria, and the results criteria. We move to discuss one by one. The first one is trait criteria. Trait in Sinhala Gati Lakshana. Traits refer to the particular qualities or characteristics of the employee processes. By assessing the particular qualities or characteristics, we can evaluate their employees' job performance. By assessing the qualities or characteristics of the employee, we can evaluate the employee's job. Some examples for the traits of employees. First one is job knowledge. Some employees are well known about how should do the job and what things they should do at their job. If any employee is aware about what to do and how to do in their job, that is job knowledge. That quality is with the person, that particular person. If we check their awareness or knowledge about their job, tasks, duties, and responsibilities, how to do and what to do their job, we can assess their employees' performance. In here, we assume that if anyone is well known about their tasks, duties, responsibilities, and how to do their duties, how to perform their duties, or what duties they should perform at the job, it leads to high performance. If anyone who don't know about what duties they have to perform, or they don't know about how to perform that duty, it leads to the low performance. Another example is cooperation, trust, honesty, initiative, and loyalty. Likewise, these all qualities are with the person, that particular employee's qualities. By assessing these qualities, we can assess their job performance. That is trait criteria. But this job knowledge, cooperation, trust, honesty, initiative, loyalty, likewise any other particular qualities or characteristics should be developed not based on the person. It should be identified as the characteristics why because of that is required to perform that particular job. Based on the job requirement, we can decide this factor is very significant when we are evaluating this job. As example, the machine operator in government manufacturing organization, their job knowledge, how to operate their swing machine is very important to perform their job. We identify job knowledge as the performance evaluation criteria. Why we select job knowledge as the performance evaluation criteria? Because of that is required to perform that particular job, not because of that any employee A has the highest level of job knowledge. That is not the reason we select job knowledge as the performance evaluation criteria. Based on the job requirement, we can determine, we can select as the key performance factor to evaluate. That is trait criteria. Trait criteria mean that particular qualities or characteristic of the employee that employee possessing their job. Why we select that factor as the performance evaluation criteria? That is significant to perform the job, not because of the person who is already have that quality. That is not the reason. If we develop performance evaluation criteria exclusively on traits only, there are advantages as well as the disadvantages. These are the main advantages when we use the trait criteria only. It is the first advantage. Traits are special qualities possessed by the employee. These qualities do contribute to better behaviors and better results. As my previous example, if machine operator have the higher level of job knowledge, that leads to or that contribute to their better behaviors, as well as that high level of job knowledge leads to better results. That if that particular employee can achieve the required level of output, mean the results. Why? But because of they already aware or they already have the required job knowledge. If we evaluate the job knowledge, that we can assume that particular quality or trait will contribute to the better behaviors and results. The second one is evaluation of traits help to identify training needs of the employee. If we are evaluating any employee, that collected evidence emphasize that particular employee has not the required level of job knowledge, it can be identified as the required training needs. It is directly related to the employee. Why that particular employee performance is low? because of their special quality, that is, they have low level of job knowledge. That is another advantage of trait criteria. This is opposite side of the trait criteria. It means disadvantages of the trait criteria. Attention on the employee does not focus on producing results. In here, what is the most important thing to the garment manufacturing organization? It is end results, what they have produced at the end of the day. But in here, what they are evaluating, what qualities their employees have or not. It is not directly focused on the results. That is main advantages, disadvantage of the trait criteria. The second one, as it is more difficult to measure traits. It is very difficult to measure or quantifiable. Evaluation becomes more subjective. We'll discuss the subjective criteria and the objective criteria in our next few slides. If we select the job knowledge as the performance evaluation criteria, how you measure the job knowledge? By asking relevant questions regarding the job knowledge. If anyone can answer these questions, but that is 100%, that is not ensure that person have the 100% job knowledge. It is some extent, but it is very difficult to identify the very difficult to measure traits compared with the results. Results is very easy to quantify. At the end of the day, we can count how many products the machine operator is produced. But when we consider about the job knowledge, it is very difficult to measure by asking questions or by taking exam. It is some extent, but we cannot ensure that is measured by measured the job knowledge 100%. Ultimately, what the employee has produced is more important than what employee process. Most of the organizational goals are directly related with what employee has produced. The way of achieving is indirect. And here, if we use traits criteria only, that is emphasized only the path, how organization, employees going to achieve the requirement, not the what they have achieved. That is another disadvantage of trait criteria. The second type of performance evaluation criteria, that is behavioral criteria. Behavior, you already aware about that. Behaviors are the way of the employee act in relation to the job. In here, there are behaviors. We are examining their employees' behaviors to do the performance evaluation. How you evaluate employee performance? By examining employees' behaviors. That is behavioral criteria. Basically, behaviors involve particular activities carried out by the employees in performing the job. Example is punctuality, attendance, planning works, organizing works, developing subordinates, controlling works. Among these examples, punctuality or attendance. Some employees attend to work. They present to the workplace. If we compare two employee A and B, the employee A is present to the workplace. That is their behavior. But the employee B is not present, absent to the workplace. That is bad behavior. By examining these two behaviors, by examining this factor, we can determine their employees' performance, their performance. Some employees attend to work on time, that is punctual. Person A is attend but with the late of 30 minutes. Employee B, when they attend to the workplace, they present at on time. If the work is started at 8 a.m., employee B is present at the 8 a.m. Likewise, by examining that behavior, those behaviors, we can evaluate employees' job performance. But if we exclusively focus on the behaviors only, these also have advantages as well as the disadvantages. The main advantage of the behavioral criteria, critical for success and progress of success, as they include particular activities to be performed. The behaviors are the way they are doing their job. By examining the way of doing their jobs, it is something about the performance. If any employee behave as we expect, as organization expect, we can assume that they produce what they want, what organization wants. Behaviors are generally free from contamination by outside uncontrollable factors. As example, if we only examine what they have produced during this corona crisis, most of the Sri Lankan government manufacturing organizations are closed. Why? What's the reason to close that organization? Is the global crisis. That reasons not with the employees' behavior. If we are evaluating only with the results, what they have produced, their production output is zero. But the reasons with not with the employee, it is with the global environment. If we are evaluating behaviors during that time period, employees are aware about what organization happened during that time period. If any time organizations ready to call back to the organization, that employee willing to come and work with the organization. The employee is loyal to the work. By examining that behavior, we can evaluate employee job. Therefore, when we are evaluating job performance by using the behavioral criteria, that is free from the outside uncontrollable factors, behaviors can be easily and fairly evaluated. The third one, making comparisons between the behaviors of managers is relatively easy. Punctuality, attendance, loyalty, many of the behavioral criteria we can compare person with another person. That comparison is very important output of the performance evaluation, because we want to determine who are the high performer and who are the low level of performer. To determine these high performer and low performers, making comparison is more important. To do that, behavioral criteria is more suitable. It leads to personal development. The last advantages of the behavioral criteria: if we collect evidence about the employees' behaviors, we can easily determine their behavioral barriers or defects. Then we can communicate that defects with the employee. That leads to personal development. Also have disadvantages of the behavioral criteria. The first one is primary objective of all employees ought to be produce results, not behaviors. As I mentioned earlier, what organizations expect, it is what employee have produced. That is not basically how they produce it. The ultimate expectation is with the results, not the behaviors. But in here, the evaluation is only with the behavior. That is not ensured the organizational requirement, the results. That is results. The second one, evaluation on behaviors are more difficult than the on results. Behaviors, when we evaluate the employees' behaviors, evaluate on the employee behaviors, basically we can use the observation technique. But at the end of the day, or at the end of the specific particular time period, we can just count the results, then we can record. But when we use the results criteria, but when we use the behavioral criteria, that is relatively difficult to evaluate. Then the final type of performance evaluation criteria, that is results criteria. Results are the outcomes produced by the employee. By assessing what outcomes or outputs employee have produced, we can do the performance evaluation. Some examples for the results criteria: when we considering about the university lecturer, number of lectures done during the academic year, that is results. When we considering about the salesman, number of products or number of units sold during the month. Another example for the salesman, number of new customer created during the year. Number of produced, number of units produced during the hour is example. the results criteria to evaluate production employees. But this is also focusing exclusively on the results criteria, advantages and disadvantages. Results are the primary goals of job performance of the employee is the first advantage when we use the results criteria. What we measure, it is what employee have produced. By employment, what organization expect, it is also the results. That is more relevant than the previous two criteria. Attention on the employee focuses on generating outcomes which are more important than the traits and behaviors at final analysis. In final analysis, what organization wants, employee have produced. That is results, not the traits or behaviors. The most important thing is the results, not the way. But in the traits and behaviors, it is highly highlighted that the employee, the way of employee is used to produce their results. Evaluation on results is the easiest compared with the evaluation on traits, evaluation on the behaviors. Results can be objectively measured. Therefore, it is easy to compare with other employees' performance. Also have disadvantages. Results may contaminated by outside uncontrollable factors. As we discussed earlier, some economic conditions, power failures or material shortage and poor tools and equipment, those all factors are uncontrollable to the employee. Due to that reason, the final result will decrease. But if we exclusively focus on the results, not their behavior or not the traits they have, their performance is at the poor level. But the reason not with the employee. That analysis cannot be done if we use only the results criteria. The second one, making comparison among the outcomes of managers is difficult. The main role of managers is taking decisions. That number of decisions taken during the year, by examining that factor, we cannot evaluate, we cannot do the accurate, correct evaluation on the managers. The results criteria is not practical to do the performance evaluation of managerial jobs. The results can sometimes be achieved by unethical or undesirable manner. Because if we use the results criteria, what we have focused only on the what they have produced, not the way. As my example, production supervisors can increase final outcomes. But the way of achieving this highest outcome is the excessive pressure on the subordinate. But over the extended period of time, excessive pressure can lead to turnover or dissatisfaction of the employee. That is unethical way. The way is unethical, but at the moment, the results are at the highest level. That is not the sustainable way to achieve results. That is dissatisfaction of using only the results criteria. Then now we have three options. By using traits criteria, we can evaluate by using behavioral criteria, or we can evaluate by using results criteria. What is the best one? Already we discussed the advantages, also each criteria with the disadvantages. Therefore, we cannot recommend any single criteria to do the performance evaluation. That is why we recommend multiplicity of criteria. That means if any manager decided to do the performance evaluation only with the trait criteria, that is not recommended. Only with the behavioral criteria, that is also cannot be recommended. Only with the results criteria, that's also not be effective. Therefore, success of performance of job is multiple concept. It is not only with the traits. It is not only with the behaviors. It is not only with the results. This means success involves many aspects. The success is the part of traits what employees have. It is part of the behaviors, how employees behave in the job. Also, it is part of what employees have achieved. Use of several criteria becomes needed in order to evaluate job performance of employee accurately. In order to assess success of the performance of university lecturer involves several aspects. By using traits, behaviors, results should be taken into account when we evaluate the job. Therefore, we cannot recommend the only one criteria out of traits criteria, behavior criteria, and the results criteria. Therefore, it is better to use, we can suggest to use multiple criteria. We can recommend to the performance evaluation, but the portion of what percentage we should taken into account out of 100 trait criteria, we should take it into account 40%, or sometime it may be 20%. That percentage may vary based on the job. As example, the bank manager, the job of bank manager is different from the same bank front office assistant. The job of front office assistant behavioral component is more important. But when we consider about the job of manager in the same bank, the results component is very important than the behaviors and traits. Likewise, it is differ from job to another job. Then another classification of the performance evaluation criteria, that is based on the quantifiable or not. Based on this, we can identify two types of performance evaluation criteria. The first one is objective criteria. The second one is subjective criteria. We'll discuss one by one. The objective criteria is criteria that factor of evaluation that are quantifiable distinctly. Simple example, number of units sold by the salesman. That is quantifiable. During the last month, how many units sold by the salesman? Exactly we can quantify. Also, objective criteria are verifiable by others. It means if the same salesman evaluated by the two sales executives, the number of based on the number of units sold by that particular salesman, the results of these two independent evaluation should be equal or same. Otherwise, there are some errors. It means the main characteristic of objective criteria is quantifiable. The second characteristic is verifiable by others. The first evaluation can be verified by the second evaluation. The first evaluation, results of the first evaluation should be equal with the results of the second evaluation when we use the objective criteria. These are some examples for the objective criteria. When we consider about the job of university lecturer, number of lectures done during the academic year. The second objective criteria is number of topics covered by the lecturer. Salesman, number of units sold by the during the month or related to the particular type period. Number of new customer created is also quantifiable and verifiable. When we consider about the production worker, number of unit produced and number of defects. Those all criteria is quantifiable, also verifiable by the second extent. Project engineer, total cost of completing a project, number of project completed. Likewise, there are several objective criteria. These are some practical examples to the objective criteria. The second category is subjective criteria. It is opposite side of the objective criteria. Subjective criteria are the factors of evaluation that are not quantifiable distinctly. As example, cooperation. By considering indirect things can be measured in some way, but not in very distinct way. By using number of conflicts occurred, number of willing favors, given availability of opposition, and so on. Likewise, is criteria. We can examine the cooperation of employee, but not the exact value. That is subjective criteria. Subjective, when we do the evaluation on subjective criteria, that is based on the personal opinions, and that is basically the human judgment. Therefore, that the personal value system or the personal judgment may differ from one person to another person. If we do the evaluation, two independent evaluation on the same employee, that may differ because of the evaluator value systems and the evaluator's judgment may differ because of the criteria is evaluated by using or considering indirect things, not the direct things. Because when we use the subjective criteria, it cannot evaluate through the direct things. Therefore, as a result of that, subjective criteria are not verifiable by others. In summary, objective criteria are quantifiable and verifiable by others. But subjective criteria is cannot quantifiable and also it is cannot verifiable by others. The reason is the subjective criteria evaluation on subjective criteria is based on the personal values and the human judgment. These are the some examples for subjective criteria. The same jobs we have taken at the objective criteria, sensitivity to the student's requirement and subject knowledge are the subjective criteria when we can consider when we evaluate the job of university lecturer. The salesman, cooperation, interpersonal relations, production worker, dependability, housekeeping, project engineer, technical ability and originality. Likewise, we can identify several subjective criteria in relation to the several jobs. Out of the subjective criteria and objective criteria, which criteria is best to develop? The same question. In our previous classification, trait criteria, behavioral criteria, and the results criteria, which type of criteria are the best one? We cannot recommend it. Only use the one criteria out of that three criteria. In here, there are two options: subjective criteria and objective criteria. It is not appropriate to use subjective criteria only for the performance evaluation, because if we use the subjective criteria, that is cannot quantifiable and as well as that cannot verify by the second evaluation. The relative degree of accuracy is high in case of using objective criteria, because we can the reason is objective criteria can be measurable as well as quantifiable. It is more appropriate to use objective criteria for performance evaluation, as many as possible. If you can evaluate based on the objective criteria, it is best. But based on the nature of the job, only on the objective criteria, the performance evaluation is not practical. Some extent, the subjective criteria is required to consider. When using the subjective criteria, use of some objective indicators, as many as possible, is appropriate. What we can recommend, use of subjective criteria only or use of objective criteria only may not be sufficient to achieve the all purposes of performance evaluation. Therefore, we can recommend use objective criteria as many as possible, but as per the requirement of the job, if we want to do the evaluation on subjective criteria, use of some objective indicators to evaluate as many as possible can be recommended when you develop the performance evaluation criteria. There are two classifications we already covered. The first one is on what factor. There are three: traits, behaviors, and results. Based on the quantifiability, quantifiable or not, there are two: subjective criteria and objective criteria. Then when we develop the performance evaluation criteria, what factors, it means what factors we are going to evaluate the job performance. The pre-requirement before developing the performance evaluation criteria, it must be started with the complete information about the job, what you are going to evaluate the performance. It is better to have the complete information about that particular job. If you are going to develop the performance evaluation criteria to the particular organization, you should have the complete or clear picture about the overall organization. If you are going to develop performance evaluation criteria to the selected category of job, and also you should have general awareness about the organization, what organization you are going to evaluate. This information basically can gather to the two main documents, that is job description and job specification. If that organization already prepared those two documents, but some organization may not have these two main documents, before doing the performance evaluation, it is better to prepare these two documents, that is called the job analysis. The pre-requirement of developing performance evaluation criteria is to do the performance evaluation. If you have correct information or right job analysis information, it is required to develop performance evaluation criteria. Then by using these main two documents, you can identify key performance areas of what jobs you want to evaluate. Based on that key performance areas, you can develop performance evaluation criteria. Then the second thing is performance evaluation standards. In our topic, there are two: performance evaluation criteria and standards. Criteria, the basic idea of criteria, the factors you are going to evaluate. This next one is standards. It is very simple compared with the criteria. Now you already have the list of factors, it means list of criteria. Based on the nature of the criteria, you should develop the performance evaluation standards. When you are determining the performance evaluation standards, the simple idea of what performance evaluation standards? It is rating scales. It is very important to differentiate, to identify the difference between high performer and the low performer. If we want to separate from high performer to low performer, identify these two types of employee. It is very important to develop sensitive performance evaluation standards. These performance evaluation standards assess how well and how far employees are performing their job. If you develop these performance evaluation standards, before developing performance evaluation standards, you already develop performance evaluation criteria. That criteria you can take on the range of values. As example, the sales staff, we can develop these alternative standards. If some employee solve the 20 units per month, their performance they can value under the very poor range according to first standards. Likewise, the quantifiable factors we can take into the range. Determining this range we call the develop of performance evaluation standards. Sometimes that may be 5 point or 5 ranges, or sometimes that may be 7 ranges, or sometimes maybe 3 ranges. It is most appropriate if you develop the at least 5 range or 7 ranges, because if you use the 3 range performance evaluation standards, that may not sensitive with the high performer and the low performer. You cannot differentiate these two types of performers if you use only the 2 range or 3 range performance evaluation standards. Just you see these 2 types of standards, it is very simple, but the developing of these performance evaluation standards should be very systematic and fair. Otherwise, your entire performance evaluation will be failed. Therefore, if you are going to develop the performance evaluation standards, these are the 7 main characteristics that have when you develop the performance evaluation standards. Should be meet several important requirements. The first characteristic is your performance evaluation standards should meet the required several important requirements. It means the basic requirement of developing performance evaluation standards is the sensitivity. It means why you develop performance evaluation standards, it is for that by using your performance evaluation standards, it must be able to differentiate high performer and the low performer. Otherwise, your performance evaluation standards may not fill your requirement. The second characteristic of effective performance evaluation criteria standards are the dynamic. It not be fixed with the time requirement or with the organizational requirement or with the change of production method or with the change of market condition. It should be changed. For that, performance evaluation standards should be dynamic rather than the fixed standards. If you have fixed standards that may fail with the environmental changes or some other factors, sometimes your standards may be fail. Standards should be written with the performance evaluation, performance agreement between the employee and employer. It is better to communicate among these two parties. Otherwise, the employee who are performing job is not aware about the standards. How they can become a good or excellent employee by achieving these standards. Therefore, it should be written and communicated. Communicate to the both parties. The fourth one should be challenge to the employee. In my previous example, if any employee sold the 100 unit, it is excellent performance. But it is very easy. By putting their normal commitment, they can solve 100 products. That is not the challenge to the employee. That is not good. If you are developing performance evaluation standards, it should be challengeable. By putting their maximum individual commitment or contribution, if anyone only with that to employee commitment who can achieve that standards. But if not committed to the work, that standards cannot be achieved. That is why the performance evaluation standards should be challenged to the employee. Then, in the evaluation perspective, it should be observable. Otherwise, it is very difficult or cannot be evaluated. My two examples are objectively we can observe how many units you have solved. We can just count, observe. The next one is measurable. We can measure. The standard should have a specific time frame. Some employees, in my example, 100 units. For what time period? The person A is achieved that quantity during the first month. But the second employee who have achieved that standards at the end of the year, who is the excellent performer? Who are the excellent performer? If not mentioned or specified the time frame, is not applicable. Therefore, if you are going to develop performance standards, should be specified the time frame. It may be 1 day, 1 hour, or 1 week, 1 month, or 1 year, maybe. But it should be specified the time frame. When you develop the performance evaluation standards, there are three approaches. The first one is historic records. By using historic records, you can develop the performance evaluation standards. It means by examining the historical records about the performance of employee, we can determine what extent employee can perform in their normal process. Some outstanding employees, how many units they can produce or solve. Likewise, by examining, observing historical records of the production or historical records of the sales, we can develop performance evaluation standards for the future time period. The next approach is time and motion study. Time and motion study is from the scientific management, but in here we can apply the time and motion study. By using time and motion study, it is possible to estimate the required time to complete main duties of the job. What is time and motion study? Is the technique for recording times of performing a certain job. We select the certain job, then we allow them to perform that particular job. Separately, we study. There are two main things. The first one is required time and the motions. Then, by using that records of output of the time and motion study, we can identify the required time to complete the main duties of the job. As example, when we do the time and motion study on machine operator of garment manufacturing organization, we can determine the 10 minutes is required to complete the one duty of the job. Then it means the average time is 10 minutes is required to complete the one main duty. It means if any employee working for 1 hour, they can complete 10 times. They can produce 10 units. They can perform 10 times their duty. Then, if they want to 10 minutes to complete their main duty, if they employed one hour, they can perform 6 times their main duty. Then, if we employed that type of employees 6 hours per day, we can determine how many times they can do their duties, perform their duties. 6 into 6, 36 times. When we develop the standards, that is average. If any machine operator produce 36 products or 36 times per day, that is in average. If any employee produce 60, that is outstanding compared with the 36. Based on this time and the output of time and motion study, we can develop the performance evaluation standards. I think you are clear. The third approach is work sampling. This is very simple. Out of the population, the entire organizational group of employees, we can randomly select the group of employees. Then at the random time period, we can observe that sample. Then we can record. By using that record, we can determine normal work. These are the ability to perform. Employees can perform this quantity of work. Therefore, if we are in our example, these machine operators, we consider 10 machine operators. The average production is 10 per hour. It means 1 hour they can produce, one employee can produce one product. If we employed 6 hours per day, their production capability, the average production capability is 6. In our performance evaluation standards, if any employee produce the 6 production, that is in average. If any employee produce more than 10, that may be excellent or outstanding. Based that performance evaluation standards developed based on the work sample, data collected from the work sample. These are the main 3 approaches. That is all about the performance evaluation criteria and standards. I think you already covered. You already have clear idea about the performance evaluation criteria and the effective characteristic of effective performance evaluation criteria, the difference between traits, behavior, and results criteria. According to the second classification, you can describe the difference between subjective criteria and objective criteria. When you develop the performance evaluation criteria, what are the pre-requirements? Then we move to the performance evaluation standards. Then you can identify the main characteristic of effective performance evaluation standards. There are 7 characteristics we discussed. Then as the last part, we describe the 3 approaches can be used to develop performance evaluation standards. These are the review questions you can answer by using the knowledge gained through this session. Define what is performance evaluation criteria. I think you already have. The characteristic of effective performance evaluation criteria. The third question is very important. Performance evaluation can be developed with respect of traits, behaviors, and results, but developing performance evaluation criteria exclusively on one criteria is not appropriate. Discuss with the suitable example. When you are answering these type of questions, you must mention what are the 3 options. It means trait criteria, behavior criteria, and results criteria with advantages and disadvantages. Then the final recommendation, that is multiplicity of criteria. Then The fourth question, describe the difference between subjective criteria and objective criteria with the suitable example. Identify the prerequirement of developing effective performance evaluation criteria. We already discussed, that is job analysis with the proper complete information about the job going to be evaluated should have. Then the sixth section should be changed as the define what performance evaluation standards mean. The three approaches can be used to develop performance evaluation standards. The last section, what are the main characteristics of an effective performance evaluation standards? That is all. You can answer these questions as review. These are my references to develop this teaching material. Thank you very much.